Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast, where we dive deep into the media industry headlines and dissect the digital disruption that diverges the masses into the new media counterculture and away from the media establishment. Here is the king of podcasts.
We're going to talk about Netflix this week on the Broadcasters Podcast. Thanks for listening in and finding the show, as you always do. And for those that have just finding the show for the first time, thanks for tuning in. And I hope you'll go ahead and download these shows, and you'll go ahead and subscribe wherever you find all your podcasts, initially through the website broadcasterspodcast.com, where all my past episodes are located, all 224 previous episodes that I've really put a lot of work into. I'm really happy with the last few episodes I actually put out, to be honest. When I look at just a few weeks ago, Warner Brothers Media and the Warner Brothers and Discovery, the merger and all the changes from that, the Twitter takeover from Elon Musk, going through all that part, I really appreciated getting to do all that commentary. Also, podcasting, how podcasting is pulling in more listeners and more profit, more potential listeners and more profit. The Will Smith slap, we talked about that in previous episodes. I did a multi-part series on the music industry, the mayhem and the digital revolution. We talked about that as well. And on top of that, a couple weeks ago, talking about UK rap and how it's upstaging the American counterparts. You might be surprised, but I give a pretty good argument on that. Then, moving along into last week, why radio is dead and podcasting is radio 2.0. It's a lot there to understand where things are. And just coming off of the NAB show keynote that they did, Transforming Radio and the Audio Renaissance, which we're going to go ahead and follow up on radio this week on the program, because they're continuing to try to figure out where they're going to go with things. Because, you know what? Inflation, the economy, is definitely hurting the media companies, and they're also definitely hurting radio in more ways than you realize. We're going to talk about that coming up. But first, let's talk about Netflix. Netflix is in a bad way right now. I haven't watched a whole lot of Netflix. When I think about the heydays of Netflix, seeing Stranger Things or Narcos, or just catching up on old shows like a Mad Men or Breaking Bad and things like that, and knowing that those shows, some of those shows that do not exist there anymore on Netflix, the level of programming we would get on Netflix is changed quite a bit. Well, Daily Beast puts a good story out and explains it. They say, quote, "It's a terrible time to be at Netflix. So for years, they've been the dominant streaming service, placing themselves well ahead of the pack. But to stay on top, it's taking a whole lot. Now, recent reports reveal losses of 200,000 subscribers in quarter one, with 2 million more predicted to bounce in the next quarter. Shares of Netflix falling 35%, wiping out $50 billion off its value in the aftermath of that news, and Netflix continues to slide. Now, I really didn't bring it up on the program at this point until now, because we really just need to find out the doom and gloom has happened. All those doom and gloom reports are happening as we speak. The negative press they're getting is rampant, and everybody's talking about it. They're now looking at a crackdown on password sharing, subscription fee increases, an overly saturated market, aka the too much TV apocalypse, have all been offered as reasons for the stumble. But there's no doubt, with over 220 million subscribers worldwide, Netflix's crown is still in place, but it's going to start sharing the pieces like a scene out of Mean Girls. Now, Netflix, they've been banking on some of the programming that's been not as quality as they've been. Netflix had a standard of programming for a while on a lot of their shows. The last show I remember watching was The Queen's Gambit. It was a great show. Great limited series, but of course probably cost some money to do it and to get that kind of staffing and the stars to be a part of this. Right now they're doing what it's kind of like a Sirius XM model. You're getting celebrity related content, but you're not getting celebrity quality stuff out there. Like, Red Widow's one thing, and some of the other movies they have now, The Prevent-to-Writ, whatever it is that Mike Myers just put out. And there's a lot of movies that are being put out that are on Netflix that could be being exhibited on movie screens. My contention really is, with Netflix putting out during the pandemic, they said they were going to pledge one new movie a year, a new feature film or original of theirs. They're not all going to be Bird Box and not all going to be, pick another movie. the problem is they're just not getting there right now. Even the documentaries are slowing down on their own content. And what they're putting out there, was better controlled. And the quality was there. Especially with some of the shows you would have that were overseas that would be brought over and dubbed, and were just doing such a great job. So right now, they're apparently baking now on cheesy romantic comedies, middling science fiction, and action flicks that dominate their top 10 list. And the TV side seems overrun by trashy reality shows that tip into hate watch territory. In stark contrast to what's going on with Apple TV+, Hulu, and HBO Max. They're churning out buzzy critical hits that are getting the kinds of accolades that Netflix used to monopolize. Well, that's what happens. With HBO and the level of programming that they get, and they've done for years, if that kind of production house is really cranking out quality content along with their normal content, they're putting out content specifically for HBO Max, and the normal gamut of package of that they're doing right now anyway. So Pretty Little Lies or The Flight Attendant, they're putting out quality shows like they always have. That because HBO is a standard. Their quality is of everything because they are pay TV. They've been the epitome of that. Everything from Sopranos to Oz to Weeds. Weeds was Showtime. Sorry. To Succession is that level. You look at Westworld. You look at You look at Ballers. When I look at that, I also look at Boardwalk Empire, The Wire, Deadwood, True Detective, The Deuce, Band of Brothers, Treme, 6 Feet Under. Like, there's a lot right there that they've done on the money and right. Not to mention the shows they have as part of their library with Warner Brothers and just other shows they've gotten into the HBO Max mix. They just really just saw it. Apple as well, doing their own level of programming that just really stands out. They're all trying to do things. They're not going to be all Game of Thrones. They're not going to be all whatever. But there's a lot going on with HBO and what they're doing right about things. And Netflix doesn't have that now. They've gone for really just trying to get some buzz on the kind of stars they bring on and really not so much the content. Because they're feeling the pressure of the other corporatized streamers and what they're putting into it. So they're having to play the same ball game that they had. They're not getting to play the same ball game when they were kind of like alone with a couple of the streamers. With all these other streamers coming into play with Peacock and HBO Max and Paramount Plus, they had to change their game. They had to change their approach. They put a lot more money in their content, but is it better content is the question. So the question they ask here is, when did Netflix content get so bad? Now, the writer for Daily Beast talks about that. They log in. There's certainly still an array of new shows jostling for attention, but many of them, but they're not being blown away. And the streaming giant, have they gone too far in picking quantity over quality? Well, they have. They're definitely quantity over quality now. Now, they talk about some of the shows that are being featured that they could really talk about when it comes to The Russian Doll or Archive 81, and then shows like Glow, which I really enjoyed a lot. And then we're starting to learn things about how certain shows are not going to get that much longevity. They make a mention of how a third season pickup for a scripted series is starting to become the unicorn in these parts. Getting burned by cancellations is part of being a TV viewer. However, this pattern continues, it might drive audiences away or at least stop them from investing in shows in order to avoid the heartache that comes from a story stopped short. Well, because one of the things is, you got to ask yourself, when you're looking at what shows are out there that are trying to gather interest in it, are just so binge-worthy that everybody has to talk about it before it's done. Like the show that's giving me that right now is Better Call Saul. They're even talking about on the Nielsen streaming ratings that Nielsen, people are catching up on Better Call Saul. This is the number 2 most streamed show right now on streaming, period. Because people are trying to catch up to the end because they know that the end of the season's coming up and the collide with Breaking Bad's coming up. You need to get through it fast because we're already past episode 4 of season 5, and now you got to better catch up pretty quick. Netflix started off really well from the get-go. They had critical hits like Orange is the New Black and House of Cards, and by the way, they were both fantastic. Both of them enjoyed a lot. And it was one of those things when those shows came out, that was one of those, that's a weekend you take and you run through it and you're good. Now, some people can still do that, but there's other shows to watch. There's other options. Plus, we had our shows on cable, but that's all changed now. Now it's just streaming. And there's really nothing that really has a gauge for people to say, okay, we don't have that appointment viewing that really used to kind of help dictate that kind of programming, and that's what's going on now. I mean, some places do, like Amazon will do that. Disney Plus will do that, but not so much. Now, they talk about how there's still some impressive scripted titles on the roster, but it's hard to ignore the shift towards reality shows like Love is Blind and Selling Sunset, and all the true crime documentaries that they made when Making a Murderer did so well. And this writer says a pretty good point here. Netflix has become my self-care streamer of choice when I want to disengage my brain, and there's nothing wrong with offering up a wide range of genres, but the window for, quote, striking hot is getting smaller and smaller. Now, one of the shows that's gotten really a lot of talk is Inventing Anna. It got traction thanks to an Emmy Award-winning leading actress, Shonda Land Credentials, or Shonda Rhimes, and the New York Magazine article that it was adapted from. But then you have shows like Hulu's The Dropout, getting a strong lead performance from Amanda Seyfried and not suffering from the same narrative bloat. And no need for any Inventing Anna episode to surpass 60 minutes, yet it somehow leaned into the girl boss bloat. Yeah, some shows definitely go past 60 minutes and they feel like they need to go that route when you could tighten things up. You don't have a particular rule or rhyme of reason. You can have 13 episodes, but then you can, we don't have to be set to a certain amount of episodes or how they're going to be scripted or how they're going to be put together. Like, the production doesn't have to be the same output every time. We know that. Now, Inventing Anna did get a drop, even though Julia Garner got a great name recognition and also got an Emmy for her role in Inventing Anna. The juggernaut continues. There's an argument to be made that Netflix continues to make popular and buzzy series, but the quality does seem to have dipped. And one repeat triumph is not enough, and noticeably lagging in the list of streaming critical darlings in comparison with HBO, Hulu, and Apple TV+. Now, the three rivals are turning out critical hit after critical hit. Ryan Murphy, who struggled to bring the same caliber of material even as his most middling FX output, certainly nothing that hits the dizzying heights of American Crime Story, yes, even Impeachment. Look, and I tried Hollywood that Ryan Murphy put together. I just could not get into it. And Ryan Murphy has put together some great shows. American Horror Story is fantastic. Scream Queens, I liked it. Even though it might not have been the right place on Fox, but it was a good show. And American Crime Story, yeah, all those are fantastic. And also, you want to have that reputation of being a great house of content. Like when FX was on Hulu, FX has always been known. John Landgraf was very well known and notorious for making sure you got great content out there. Some of the best shows I've said on this program. When I think about The Shield and Justified, and even my MC to a point, based on my love for Sons of Anarchy, which was so great. And just looking at what they're doing right now, and the level of program that they have, it's struggling. Now, David E. Kelley has this latest contribution. He has an Anatomy of a Scandal, making the most bonkers moments of 9 Perfect Strangers look sedate. Coming from someone who has seen only one clip, his name is now connected to the silliest moment on TV this year. All press is good press, but maybe this isn't the dream promo beyond getting hate watchers to tune in. Now, we know that Stranger Things are on the horizon. It doesn't seem like enough. And then we also know that Netflix is going up against branded series and a legacy series and legacy brands and just genres that they will never be able to compete with Marvel, with Star Wars, with Disney. It's going to struggle to compete because they're not branding shows in a certain level. You're just kind of like, it's something for everyone on their channel. Plus, they don't have any sports. No live content. They're definitely, they have themselves to a certain way. So you got Stranger Things is coming up, and also Ozark just concluding its series. And then, of course, there's Squid Game, and there's Russian Doll and Bridgerton. So they still have some shows that are definitely nominated, and they're definitely controlling the Oscars and the Emmys. But Netflix, as they say, is at a crossroads as it tries to balance the business and creative scales. Headline-making subscription cancellations and subsequent share slump further fuel a narrative that the streamer is losing its way. And there's just more to that, but that's part of the story. And then Vulture comes in and talks about how their bad habits have caught up with them. Now, one of the things they talk about is the justification for the level of spending they've been putting on content. Because we always said they had to go put out so much content to make sure they can continue to grow. Well, now they've hit the plateau, and now they're going backward a bit. Their CFO, Spencer Newman, talked to a Morgan Stanley conference and says he still believes Netflix was on a fast track to a business that's 500 million members, or more than double the roughly 222 million it already has. But Netflix is by no means declaring long-term growth out of the picture. It's suddenly turned very pessimistic. They're expecting to lose 2 more million subscribers over the next 3 months. And it's not justifying the amount of money they've been spending, which doesn't help either. So industry folks that are being talked to by this Vulture reporter says whether Netflix will ever be able to get to 300 million subscribers or 500,000, and they're all pessimistic about it. And they talk about the content. Hits have always driven the success or failure of entertainment companies, and some analysts, Netflix executives themselves, not having enough must-stream content lately is the chief cause for the great growth slowdown. And it was amazing that all these corporate giants come into the streaming game, and they have truly clouded up, and the traffic is now bumper to bumper, and it's kind of hard to really keep up with what's out there. Listen, I will say this as well. I mean this all wholeheartedly. There's something to be said about not utilizing your terrestrial sources for sampling streaming content. There's not enough of that. And that's a problem. I mean, I know you can't give it up or give it away, but there has to be a way to go ahead and create content for your terrestrial streaming sources that are free to use as a marketing tool to get people to watch your stuff. And most importantly, find your other ways to get money off of these shows. Listen, if you're not going to get the streaming out there, then get your ad revenue on these shows by repurposing them on network television or on cable TV. You have the availability, you have the access. Put the shows back on there. I mean, with Paramount Plus, if there's certain shows you have that are doing so well, then get them on the CBS. You have that big fat network there. You got CW. Do something with it. You got Paramount Network. You got a whole lot of places to go and put some content up there. And, Paramount's actually done that when they put out was it 1884, the prequel to Yellowstone? That was one of the things they did. Yeah, really good. But there's that part, plus the Netflix movies. When they're so critically acclaimed and you want to make sure they're going to hit the Oscars, Netflix should make a deal to at least allow the movies to be exhibited maybe a week or two simultaneous to the release on Netflix. They should do that. They did it for The Irishman. It worked pretty well. And there's other movies like Red Widow that I would have gone to see if they would have been available to watch. They should have the red carpet premieres. They should let the movies get the exhibition like they should. I mean, the smart thing that all these streaming services are doing now, okay, certain movies are making it right over to Peacock after 30 days. So like the movies like The Outfit I saw over a month ago, that's now on Peacock. And then you have movies like, some movies that were out like 45 weeks or 45 months. It's to be 45 days. Oh, my God. 45 days. And they have moved now over. Like, what? HBO Max picks up The Batman. And it's already out there. After I watched it. Hey, okay, great. I mean, you want to be able to get multiple avenues of revenue. I mean, because, if The Batman was only on HBO Max, it was not going to make the money that it did. Post-pandemic, we all need to learn that. But they're not doing that right now. For whatever reason, they just choose not to. But that's also my own preference. I will say that too. Now, they talked to someone here, Matthew Ball. He's an author of The Metaverse and How It Will Revolutionize Everything. He talked to CNBC recently, and he believes that the Netflix chief content officer, or now co-CEO Ted Sarandos, identified the glitch in the company's binge factory a while back. And Netflix seemed to have realized the need to reset TV way back in fall of 2020. As Ball sees it, the executive shakeup in Netflix, coupled with Hastings hinting about slower spending growth and the elevation of Sarandos to co-CEO, cannot be read as a sign the two men knew TV to improve its batting average and efficiency. And while in the days of linear TV, you could fire your programming chief and bring in a new one and have a whole new slate on the air within the space of a single year, streaming operates a lot more like the movie business. Change comes relatively glacially thanks to far more ambitious and expected productions and the full season release model. Quote, this sort of reset takes 3 to 4 years to take full effect, and even when done right, your next year's in the can. The year after that is almost certainly tied to what was in development before the change, and the third year, most of your shows are still returning ones. So Sarandos hasn't been afraid to say that there would need to be a reset to the company for creative. On the earnings call, he made the case that Netflix is still making plenty of programming choices that audiences want. And as you read between the lines, Sarandos thinks the issue is that the number of home runs that they're hitting aren't enough, and given the number of at-bats the company takes every year. They want a better track record, a better success record on what they're doing. The problem is, and again, this is not some massively deep observation, wanting more hits and actually making them are two different things. So Netflix has just been throwing money at wherever it can at Hollywood and wait for the success to start rolling in. So 5 or so years ago, anybody with a hint in Successor TV got a call from the rep saying Netflix would like to write you a big check. That's where Shonda Rhimes and Ryan Murphy came in with years of production cost inflation in Tinseltown, and Netflix bidding up the price of talent at every level, hurting the linear TV outlets. Without Shonda Rhimes or Ryan Murphy fully committed to those networks, hey, there are some that have not moved over. You know, when you look at Dick Wolf, he hasn't left anywhere. The folks that do NCIS or CSI, they haven't gone anywhere. Belisario, no, not at all. The new streamers who entered the market after had no choice but to spend big too. But Ball also mentioned in his analysis in 2020, if all it took was spending more on top talent, the video business would just be about who spends more. So competition matters, they say. And they were always worried more about anything but other streamers. Saying like Sleep, Fortnite, or TikTok. And while yes, Netflix is powered by great programming, it's been so beloved by subscribers, the platform itself was more important than any other individual title. One industry vet who's worked in both streaming and linear says Netflix tried to create a world where entertainment is something you do, open the Netflix app, as opposed to shows and movies you love and share with friends. The strategy was working when Netflix and streaming were novel, but now it's less successful in a universe where 2 other companies are having streaming offerings nearly as robust as Netflix and a handful of others in the market with well-known, stocked, and better curated platforms of their own. Now, when they talk about the market of streaming, social media buzz and critical reviews are hardly foolproof ways of determining how beloved content is, but they're not nothing. And even a casual observer of television right now on streaming can immediately grasp that HBO Max, Apple TV Plus, and Disney's Hulu have been doing better lately, launching new shows that dominate the culture conversation. Not so much Netflix. Squid Game was the TV hit of 2021, and the global platform remains awesome. But it's not just that viewers have more legit streaming choices. The mere existence of well-funded rivals hurts Netflix's ability to buy the best content. Right, now there's a market where people are bidding for it. And it's not just Netflix in the conversation. 5 years ago, top content creators who wanted immediate global impact and a huge paycheck only had Netflix or Amazon Prime, and there was no HBO Max or FX on Hulu in the picture to reach the offers of Netflix. But now you do with those, including Apple TV Plus, increasingly beating out Netflix for the best ideas. Netflix got where it is by being a classic disruptor, but the problem is they can't be another Napster like it was in music. We don't want that. It totally upended the way we watch TV and pioneered the idea of a global TV network, releasing a half dozen new shows every week and putting out all episodes at once for audiences to binge were innovations to help make Netflix what it is. Well, what helped Netflix's explosive growth early on may now be hurting it at the margins. Not because those ideas are suddenly bad, but because company executives have almost been dogmatically resistant to change. The binge model is core to the company's DNA, and many viewers do prefer not to wait between episodes. But millions of viewers also love the idea of appointment TV, and what's more, Netflix struggles to make more hits. A weekly release model extends the shelf life of a show and helps build word of mouth. So now, there's a thought that maybe that given that weekly format again would be better off for viewers to get things back the way they were, because there was a reason why television worked so well the way it was for 70 years to get where they are now. All right. It's making it harder for Netflix to build reliable franchises it so desperately needs more of. Netflix is further eroding its connection to audiences through unwritten mandate to end the vast majority of new shows after no more than 3 seasons, with only the very biggest or most cost-efficient scripted hits lasting longer. And what they're saying, basically, under anonymity, a competing executive says that, quote, they're commoditizing entertainment when they end shows so soon. They're making it so disposable. They're telling people it doesn't matter. Yes. Because how we know a show's doing well is when it does have a good track record and it has a length of shows to talk about. Listen, there's a reason why I'm now sitting through 357 episodes of Dallas on Freevee, which was IMDb TV, and I'm sitting through it, man. I just got into season 8 right now, and I don't have any slowing down on it. It's a show that there's so much there to ground to cover. There's so much to go through. I'm just not getting tired of it. I'm still more engaged in the Dallas than I ever was before. It's incredible. So they're doing a great job right now with all these shows. It's really incredible what's going on with the fact that, yeah, there are certain shows of the best. You have to think about this. Now, cable, they did start changing the setup of the shows and having 13 episodes. The binge worthiness of seasons was good, but the best shows that Netflix ever had lasted more than 5 seasons. House of Cards, Orange is the New Black, Narcos to away because they had Mexico and the other Narcos. Like, they just did things where it's different, and it's tougher that way. It's more difficult. Netflix executives apparently are become so convinced of the superiority of their platform, they become resistant to evolving it. Even as the competitive landscape has dramatically changed, a company that was once ahead of the curve is now playing catch-up. And now Netflix is doing what all corporate companies will do. They're definitely looking at cutting everything. So because of the stock collapse, budget savings could come even more imperative. So Netflix right now, they're in damage control. I mean, this is not a big thing because they're still the dominant player, but now the weaknesses come in. The vulnerability has been found. And because of this and the way they're reacting, and because they don't have any, and like the executive said before, it's not like TV where Fred Silverman screws up NBC TV in 1980 and then they bring in a new programming chief. No. That's not happening now. You don't have a Leonard Goldson. You don't have a Les Moonves to come right in and change things up. A Brandon Tartikoff. No. You don't have that. A Warren Littlefield. You don't have one of those. No. You don't have those kind of executives that can just go ahead and change the entire planning out of programming, which is unfortunate that you are producing shows so far ahead and you have to do so many because you have to fill, because you're not even doing, because there's something to be said about when the networks had to go ahead and slate shows so that you had something to watch in prime time every day of the year. But right now, with all the streaming we're seeing right now, we're getting enough shows for like 20 channels. Full service broadcast networks. We're getting the level of 20 channels now. That you can program everything across the board with the amount of content that's being put on a regular basis. There was something to be said, something unique about having that fall season and the spring and having certain shows make their way up into the fall. And, listen, I'm not trying to be old-fashioned here. Like, I'll tell you what, watching Dallas and watching some of those seasons and having season 7 be 30 episodes, man, that's a run. But it's amazing how they were able to keep that show engaging enough from the beginning of the season to the end. And the storylines they had to go and stretch out for so long to put 48 minutes worth of content onto the show each week. But they were also trying to hold on to 25, 26 million viewers, and they were up against the likes of Dynasty back in the day. And it wasn't easy, but they found a way to continue to keep their stories fresh and to move them along. Like, I never feel like they're going stale or they're really kind of sluggish. It's not. You can't get that kind of level of writing now. But there's just so much content out there that no one has enough time in the day to get through everything. You're never going to. And so for me, I'm going to say that there's just too much to stream. There is too much content out there. And to keep putting out new content as everybody does, you just can't have a streaming service be a repository. They have to constantly have new streaming content available, new and fresh, to get people to watch. But the same thing goes with the fact that if the shows are only going to last for a little bit and they're limited series and they're not positioned as limited series, they're actually getting cancellations and the story doesn't get be completely told, that's a big problem. When Netflix is doing cancellations now like that, it's one thing if a show's not performing well. But when you're doing it for budget cuts, that's bad. It's one thing to cancel a show because the show wasn't performing well. Some of the shows that get put out, that might have a certain content that's not going to resonate with a large audience. Yeah, it's not going to last that well. It's not going to do that well. Sure. So the big issue for Netflix isn't revenue but growth. It needs to find ways to get people to sign up and fewer people to cancel each month. So what they're going to try to do now is they want to offer a lower price tier of Netflix, including ads. And that wasn't something they wanted to do before. But if they can make the price down and bring it more ad-supported. Listen, I got the Peacock ad-supported version to watch WWE wrestling. And there's I will watch Law & Order from time to time on there, right? And I really hadn't kept up with the new Law & Order. Just very formulaic. And that's okay. Just don't have time for it. With all the other things I'm watching. But then you have that. Hulu having an ad-supported tier and all the others, even especially all the music platforms, the same thing. Or they're free versions. But they don't know what they're going to do to slow the increase in this content spending. They could reduce the overall speed, even substantially, but nothing should be ruled out. And that Netflix, they think, is being predicted, will instead change how it spends its content budget and what kind of shows it makes. How exactly that plays out is the big unknown with so many other things at Netflix right now. So maybe certain movies should not be made. Look, Netflix doesn't have to make movies. Netflix does well doing TV shows. If they want to go ahead and bankroll movies that are out there that are independent or whatnot, that's actually what they should be doing. Netflix should not be producing the content. They should be bankrolling actual other film producers to do movies that get a limited release in theaters and then go right to Netflix after. They don't need to be making their own original movies. They should be making their own original series. And that's something I think that's got to be understood as well, is that you can't do both. Not necessarily good. Of HBO being the best example of doing this, HBO, they will put out movies, but they're not so many. Not at the level that what they're, and also they're not putting out the level of star power that some of their other movies will do, because some of them are very critically acclaimed. But Netflix, when they're doing some of their movies, and they're taking some of the stars out there. Do they need to have Gal Gadot and Dwayne Johnson and like a Julia Roberts or Adam Sandler and have all these movie deals for them? Is that really helping them at all? When those stars could very well go to the movies, to the movie studios and get themselves regular movie deals like everybody else and get their movies in theaters, which people will watch. But because of how Netflix and other streamers have done with the movies, the lack of movies available has changed because the movie houses now have to rely on the genre-based content. The movies should be done by the movie studios. Netflix doesn't necessarily need to be a movie studio. They should be a movie studio itself, but bankroll. Like, here's the thing. Great example, WWE Studios was a great example. When WWE does their own television programming, they do their documentaries, they do a lot of different things, even reality programming. But then for them to go ahead and start doing movies and bankrolling movies where they would produce their own and they were in great quality. Think about them where they, when they had to go and do something with, if they were trying to do the movies they're doing now, with the star power they're commanding, with some of these stars that have been not at a high level as they once were before, okay? There was a thing where Netflix did a good thing where, if a movie got passed on by a movie studio, Netflix picked it up. Cloverfield's a great example. That's when that was the heyday of Netflix. Netflix didn't have to make movies. They could just piggyback movies that got done, and then you know what? They picked it up. Hey, look, Amazon Prime, another great example, Coming to America, the second one. Man, that was not going to do well in theaters. I'll tell you that for sure. But the fact that they bought that movie to bring it over to Amazon made sense. Plus, Amazon did the right thing where they bought MGM. Okay? The other streamers, they have their own movies. HBO has Warner Brothers. They have other movie houses, Miramax and other places. Not Miramax, but they have other... Yeah, they have other sources for their movies. They're not making... HBO Max is not making the movies themselves. Maybe HBO Pictures... But for the most part, that other movie studios within the umbrella of these big media conglomerates, they have that. Apple does not. Hulu does. Netflix does not. But I don't believe Apple's doing so much on movies as they are doing TV shows, which is a different story. You stick to one lane that you can really do good at. So Apple doing TV shows works for them. But when you're having the thing that's being done now where Netflix is not necessarily, they wanted to be able to corner the market on multiple markets. Okay. Well, stop trying to do movies. I mean, do movies in the sense that you can go ahead and pick up a movie studio. You can go ahead and pick up movies to go ahead and feature and put out there. But the truth is, you need to worry more about trying to create TV shows that are working out because your Netflix original TV series are what brought people to the dance, not the movies. I think Netflix needs to, they need to change up on what they're spending on movies. Continue to do the high-end television because that's what really is good for them. When they do television programming that is high quality, and it's really working out. Because look, of the shows they're describing, Event to Anna, or Ozark, or Orange is the New Black, or House of Cards, or Glow, like that's a lot of good heavyweight production, quality programming, quality talent. That's a different story. Queen's Gambit, that's different. But the movies, they don't necessarily need to do that. I mean, when I see Last Days of American Crime, or some other ones that they've picked up, I mean, if Network's supposed to be an exhibitor, okay. But they should also have the exhibiting power of being able to put their movies into theaters for a little bit of release and simultaneously make some money off of there and go a different route of making some money on multiple routes. You don't have to exhibit for a long time. Take that first weekend and see what comes of it. And more than anything else, stop making these movies with these other stars that, they're basically direct-to-cable. Back in the day, it would be direct-to-cable. You don't have to go that route. Listen, Adam Sandler could go back and keep doing movies like he was before And you can go back and having, pick a name. You can have other stars that can go back to doing movies like they did before, where they can get to the movies, to the movie studios, have them bankrolled to go being exhibited. Because some of those stars need to go back out and satisfy the movie fans to go back to the theaters. Just because people are complacent and they like the idea of just paying the $13 to $15 to go and watch all these movies at home, well, you're not doing it for them because that's not enough spend. You need to be able to make money in other routes. Now, TV is what you watch at home. Movies should be in the theater. And if they go to the theater, premium video on demand, then give it some prestige. Make the movies matter. Let the movie studios do that job. Because they're going to want to make their movies as much as they can. Pick up the ones that you know you can pick up and say, okay, we can pick up some on a good deal. And you know the movie's going to have been made well. So you pick it up and you take a chance on it and you do well. Remember, how often do we hear about shows on Netflix or other, especially Netflix, where certain shows all of a sudden become sleeper hits because they were once canceled by a network because at the time that show wasn't really, was not at the level what the audience was ready for, or it was for the wrong audience because some of the shows that were being done on network TV or cable television might not have hit the right demographic, but Netflix does. And then all of a sudden people will discover shows that get an audience. Imagine that. I think it's an interesting story to say about that. Another story to talk about is Anatomy of a Scandal, which I guess I got to go and watch. I have not had a chance to look at. Rupert Friend was great in Homeland. I should go watch it just for him alone, but I have to watch it. And Sienna Miller has done some good stuff, and Naomi Scott. I should watch all this. I just haven't gotten to it yet. But that's because I don't watch a lot of stuff with political undertones. Like, I really don't try to watch anything like that now. It's not been interesting to me. Like it was House of Cards back in the day. Like, politics is very much more salacious and much more corrupt and much more worse than it once was. I don't like the way it is now. I don't want to deal with it. So when you look at the show, obviously we know that Anatomy of a Scandal is being said as a ridiculous show. The first of many upcoming Netflix projects from Big Little Lies writer David E. Kelley. You'd be forgiven for thinking the synopsis reads like the standard contemporary drama fare, and its latest show, adapted for the screen with co-writer Melissa James Gibson of House of Cards fame, hasn't one of her critics with any semblance or notable style or substance. One writer has referred to the show as roughly 6 hours of Sienna Miller sighing, which is one of the more forgiving assessments you'll find on the internet if you go looking. But the show has skyrocketed to the top of Netflix's weekly popularity charts, more than 75 million hours viewed in the past 7 days, has become the first show to knock Bridgerton Season 2 off its perch, and is poised to remain in the top spot for several weeks to come. Except the success isn't really a wonder at all in recent years. Netflix has perfected the art of trickster television, series that attract audiences like moths to a flame, with big names and moody marketing only to leave them unsatisfied but equally unwilling to bail on their time investment halfway through watching. Yeah. I still think of watching the show Alter Carbon. Joel Kinnaman was in it. I was like, I like him, because he was on one of my favorite shows on AMC that got put out there, and it was really good. And it was based on a Swedish show. What was the name of that show again? The Killing. What a fantastic show on AMC. Loved that show. And I didn't care if the murder didn't get answered until the second season. And if you haven't watched it, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to go along. And, it was really good. And he was in RoboCop. That was okay. Informer was pretty good too. But I'll tell you what. I gave Altered Carbon a chance, and I could not keep going through it. It was just so complicated, so convoluted to me. Another writer talks about the Prestige Imposter. Is that what this show was? Anatomy of a Scandal. A type of show that, in his words, quote, has all the trappings of your glossy HBO favorites, huge stars, silly budgets, big-ticket writers, but veers closer to EastEnders in depth and quality, a Trojan horse filled with human excrement. End quote. Wow. Yeah, kind of trash TV, they said. I have to watch this show, though. I'm going to have to watch it anyway. Netflix is said to be the biggest offender when it comes to peddling below-par series in such large quantities. Make no mistake, the platform still has the capacity to produce awards-worthy television. Shows like Stranger Things and Sex Education rank among the best in recent memory, but its lazy output has begun to grate on subscribers, toying with the notion that their money might be better spent elsewhere. Netflix bosses know it. And like Apple TV Plus, whose recent projects include Coda and Severance, have proven the value in investing in truly unique original programming, Netflix must now trust in the willingness of its viewers to embrace the unfamiliar and give those original series that do break the mold the time to breathe before condemning them into the scrap heap. Yeah, playing with smoke and mirrors and just saying, oh, look, because this person's on here and this and that. Yeah, I hate that. But it's becoming a little too common, too. Where we'll hear hype of a show, and then all of a sudden, I hear nothing after that because people will stop talking about it, or it'll be panned. And there will be enough people that really care about panning it because not enough people will watch it. Netflix subscribers, the writer says here in Tech Radar, says they're not at fault. Logic simply suggests that the company will look to replicate its big wins by doing just that, producing homogenous series that reap big viewership figures at the expense of critical disdain. Perhaps, though, a claim is overrated. If audiences are genuinely enjoying Anatomy of a Scandal and not simply sticking it out until the end, then more power to Netflix. Still, for our money, the streamer must focus on quality over quantity moving forward. See, and everybody keeps talking about that. And, you know, they could try to do things to make the experience a little bit better or to crack down on password sharing. Sure, you could do all that if you want, if you think that's going to help, but I don't think that's the overall answer. Netflix could be doing so much better with itself. But they don't. They choose not to. And it's a shame. But there's no answer for what they're doing right now. And it's amazing. I got through 50 minutes talking about this so far. But there's nothing else that can be said. Another story that just came out as well that's not helping at all. Netflix now, and remember, this is during a bad economy right now. So, there's a couple other stories that come up here, and this is not helping either. Unless, let me tell you, I thought I was going to go ahead and cover, I was going to just cover other stuff tonight, like the radio stuff. We're not getting that tonight. I want to get this in an hour. I got Netflix stuff to still talk about. There's still other stories that keep popping up as we go along. Shows I don't even get a chance to talk about with yet. So here's two more. That's going to help wrap us up to an hour. Netflix is being sued by its own shareholders over subscriber slump. Said they were being misled about subscriber drops. So, yeah, now your shareholders are looking to jump ship. So a lawsuit was filed Tuesday, May 3rd, Federal District Court in San Francisco, alleging that Netflix violated U.S. security laws, making, quote, materially false and or misleading statements to shareholders during the earnings call. They also claim that Netflix, quote, failed to disclose material adverse facts about the company's business, operations, and prospects. Now, Netflix has been under fire before, so this is nothing new to them. But if this lawsuit, which seeks class action status, it'll seek unspecified monetary damages on behalf of investors who own Netflix shares between October 19, 2021 and April 19, 2022. Ouch. That's not good. So they're saying a number of things with this lawsuit that's not helping much. And that the allegations talk about how Netflix has been covering up losses going back to the third quarter earnings in 2021 of October. As shareholders claimed they were not being told about Netflix's decline to subscriptions. And that Netflix was exhibiting slower customer acquisition growth due to, among other things, account sharing by customers and increased competition from other streaming services. Well, let's talk about that part. Now, their shares have also suffered. So Netflix, their stock price went down 67% in the part of the lawsuit. From $691 a share in November 2021 to just under $226 in April 2022. Now, part of that is the inflation. Part of that's the oncoming recession. If you're watching stock market right now, you're watching the Dow Jones, you realize all these big stocks are all hurting right now. Now, the other story that doesn't help either for this right here, by the way, this is from IGN. The other story that doesn't help much at all either is the fact that there was a survey that was done about subscribers and if they would stay on to catch up with what's going on with the program. Like if they would go ahead and stay around in the case that password sharing was going to get cracked down, and then certain people that would have access to accounts would be taken out. Well, there's a number for that too. 13% of Netflix subscriptions would cancel, or subscribers would cancel, if they're charged extra for password sharing. My brother has that issue, and he's not password sharing. He's got several accounts, but even then it's like, okay, if he wants to go in and watch shows on the same password on a different device, if they're going to start charging per device that you're putting it on for like each IP you're on, then there's a problem. A survey was done among 2,200 U.S. adult broadband users, 1,315 Netflix users. A company called Illuma. Their research found that if Netflix charged $3 a month for additional out-of-home users, 13% of those users would likely cancel the service altogether. 12% would likely at least one of out-of-home users who otherwise wouldn't be monetized. So the extra $3 a month would be taken out. And by the way, they're already trying to do that. Netflix is doing that now in Latin American countries, adding a $3 per month extra household format. Illuma actually thinks, or Michael Greason, founder and principals at Illuma, says that he actually thinks, now this is crazy, that he believes that less than half would actually do so. So he thinks a lot more people will actually cancel if they do the password sharing and they start counting the devices that are doing that and charging what? Now it'll be like what, from $15 to $18 a month? It's a high price to pay compared to everybody else that's out there. So Greason says, quote, Netflix is a highly regarded service relative to its competitors. And he mentions that the research, they have a good sense for how intention translates to action. And says that, quote, Netflix is a highly regarded service relative to its competitors. And it's one of the variables that his group considers, leading to expectations the number who actually cancel will be lower. So he's trying to say that it'll be half of that 13%. I don't know about that. I still think it'll be more. Some people are going to be upset by doing that. So as for those who will add $3 a month per user, it's more likely because 2/3 of those sharing passwords borrow from direct family members, such as a father to a son or vice versa. The thinking along the lines of is if credential sharing is no longer allowed, is it better for the family member to pay the full price of $15 a month or simply pay an extra $3 a month on the existing account? The direct family angle makes a big difference here, Greason says. So would potential gains, from implementing that charge sharing offset potential losses from those that leave? And he says, I believe they will, though it might take several quarters before this is evident to investors. And much hinges on how elegant the company's password management solution is. For the last few years, and to alleviate mass exodus, Netflix executives have remained consistent. The solutions they deploy must not rock the boat too much. And if users are charged extra for extra out-of-home accounts, it could pique more interest and a lower-cost ad-supported tier along with the password crackdown, which could be implemented. Now, Greason goes on to say that it's about how to best monetize password sharing, not just limited. For the ad-supported tier will make sense to some. Others, the $3 a month add-on, or remember to their own $15 a month subscription. The point is, freeloaders have plenty of options to not use the service legitimately. If they chose otherwise, their access will be terminated. Now, we're going to leave it at that when it comes to Netflix. We've gone through the whole gamut. And, you know, there's something to be said about this digital disruption, where Netflix is being positioned to be the next Napster. And I don't like that happening, but, you know, it's what happens to some corporate giants, where Netflix can be smart. They're just weak right now. They've shown some vulnerability. They can bounce back. Let's see if they figure things out, because they've been a very forward-thinking company. They have really set the trend for many different things. And I would not want Netflix to start falling down as a result when they've done so much for the business. I hope it doesn't happen that way. Let's just hope for that. Now, there's other stories I want to bring up. And listen, there's so much I wanted to bring up this week. I did not get a chance to talk about, but I'm going to just bring it up here. You know, there was so much on radio I was going to bring up, and I did not have time to bring it up. I'll just bring it up till next week. I'll have more than enough I need to for next week. As a matter of fact, about, the radio being a public option, the issue about with the amount of cars not being put out there with dashboards, really the amount of cars not being pushed out. What's going to happen to radio when it comes to being on the dashboard coming forward, things like that. There's a lot of issues they're going through right now that we talked about. The relevancy of radio. We continue to talk about it here on the program. We'll do that next week. So there's a couple of things we want to talk about real quick. Number one, before we wrap things up, a couple of quick takes. Facebook dropping podcast listening. So this show will still be available on Facebook, but yeah, they're cutting the cord with Spotify and they're dropping their podcast listening option. So it's already been announced. So podcasters need to inform listeners of the impending change. Facebook doesn't plan to announce the dropping of the podcast listening option from the social network. So yeah, the companion live audio rooms feature is not going to be integrated into Facebook Live, giving users the option of either hosting a live audio only event or adding video. And they already announced they discontinued a separate integration with Spotify, allowing users to listen to a full podcast or song directly on the social media site using a special media player within Facebook. They just have better things to do with themselves. So I don't mind Facebook getting out of the platform here, out of podcasting, as they did. I don't have a problem with that. I think it's probably better off. And what they said, Mark Zuckerberg actually talked during the earnings call with analysts about it, and they said that the company stepping away potentially is that podcasts did not increase engagement on the social media app. It's also a way to trim expenses at Meta, focusing on other ventures. So yeah, it just didn't work. Better off. We don't need podcasts to be on every platform out there. That's okay. So it's nice to go and see it being done here. There's a lot of important places to go looking for it, so there we go. But as we know, Facebook really didn't make much of a difference. I didn't get much traction from Facebook as a result. And even the podcasting hosts out there said they didn't get much of anything that came from the app in terms of downloads from Facebook. It really didn't make much of a difference. Edison's research said in November that among those surveyed for the podcast consumer tracker, 8% said they listened to a podcast on Facebook. 20% they said they occasionally use Facebook to listen to a show, which is much smaller than Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. So there you got that. And one other story I'll bring up real quick before we wrap things up was the pile of new and returning TV shows and how the Emmy calendar is now to blame for all this. Let me bring that up real quick. Now, they talked about peak TV for a decade, where we now have over 1,000 unscripted shows now on a regular basis every year. And with the likes of Peacock, Paramount Plus, Discovery Plus, Netflix, Hulu, Prime Video, Disney, and Apple TV Plus, and HBO Max complicate matters. And you have other services like Roku, Tubi, and now Freevee, and entrants like AMC Plus, Acorn, BritBox, and Hunger. That's a whole lot more. But Hunger is made up, by the way. They said in the article, and I read it. There you go. The real issue now is the logjam of year-round programming truly makes it impossible to develop any sort of major awareness for new shows, particularly entrants without obvious legacy IP. And those covering TV long enough have been overwhelmed with the amount of content coming out. And where John Landgraf of FX fame actually thought that the primetime bubble will burst by the end of the last decade. But it has not. The now tyranny of too much TV has trickled down to consumers who didn't suddenly find more hours of the day to watch all this stuff. I just said that before. The streaming business is experiencing its first major crisis of confidence. And also there's the wall that we have now for subscribers, which we knew was going to happen to, about how many streamers they're willing to subscribe to and the amount they're eager to pay. And so those are some of the issues they have right now that are becoming a bigger problem. So anyway, that's what I wanted to cover tonight. That's your Broadcasters Podcast. Thanks for listening in as you always do. Remember, don't find us on Facebook. We're not there anymore. But thank you for listening into the program as you always do. I really appreciate all of you checking us out. BroadcastersPodcast.com. More information coming up on the credits. Thanks for listening in. Until next week, remember that content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.